February edition of Mytech U. Today we're going to be discussing hybrid source your IT. We deliberately chose a title that might lend some attention grabbing. A lot of people have heard of insourcing and outsourcing, but what does hybrid sourcing mean? So we'll talk about that a little later. However, I wanted to welcome Dave James, a colleague and business partner of mine at Mytech, and we'll host the discussion today. The genesis of the discussion really came about from one of our manufacturing alliance organizations that we work with, and some of their clientele that they work with, different manufacturers in the state of Minnesota, actually were curious about this type of topic. So we tried to put together a candid view of the true benefits and risks associated with insourcing your IT, outsourcing your IT, as well as kind of having some sort of a blend that ends up being a hybrid. So we'll talk about that today. Again, I want to welcome Dave James, and we'll be kind of charging through the presentation. A couple housekeeping notes. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the question pane, and we'll be able to either answer them within the broadcast or follow up with you after the fact and clarify any questions you may have. So with that said, Dave, let's kick it off here. So how many of you have ever been frustrated with your IT? Most people have encountered problems with IT and frustrations, and that's one of the things that IT is not easy. It's a difficult game, and we definitely recognize that it's a frustrating experience because it's really complicated. Even the simplest thing can be complicated. So we're hoping that part of this presentation is to help eliminate some of those frustrations, or at least give you some direction and insight into how to overcome some of those frustrations. So to start, we're just going to go through an outline of, we're going to provide a brief framework with regard to the type of thinking and the frame of mind we want you to be in as we go through the presentation. We're going to then touch on the different types of outsourcing, which is going to be the core content of the presentation. And then finally, we're going to touch on what are some of the things you can do to help determine which one is the right one for you. And we'll talk about how we can help in that assessment. So moving forward, Dave, would you mind giving a brief history of Mytech as far as what kind of our experiences is relative to the small and medium business community?
Not at all. Thank you. I first of all just want to ask, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right, Nathan?
Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I really appreciate you inviting me to participate in this presentation, and hope that I can offer some effective commentary that will help folks have a little more insight. So Mytech Partners is an IT outsourcing organization. We've been around for 14 years, coming up on 14 years. I've been a part of this organization the entire time. We are located in Roseville, Minnesota, 50-plus employees today. Our services are provided in the form of either projects, things like helping our clients get server infrastructures up and running, or or managed services. We spend a lot of time watching over, managing, patching, remediating issues for our client networks on a proactive basis as part of a monthly service. I am in charge of, one of my responsibilities is business development, and I spend the majority of my time working with companies that have compliance-related issues, things like FINRA or SEC for financial services, or HIPAA for healthcare. Any organization that really has a high level of concern over network security, backup systems, disaster recovery systems, things like that. But Mytech serves a number of different market sectors, including, as I just mentioned, financial service and healthcare, but also manufacturing. And really, I'd say we have clients all across the board, ranging in size from 15 to 25 users up to about 300 or 400 users.
So that's the key point I wanted to use as a bit of a segue, Dave. So thank you for that brief summary. Is that this presentation is really focused around the small and medium business segment, which again we categorize in the 10 or 15 office users on the small end. There's usually a cusp or a threshold where you'll find around 70, 80 users, where most organizations of the 15 to 80 do not have their own IT. Most, I'm generalizing here, some of them definitely do. But then above 80 to, say, the 300 to 400 to 500 user range, staff person range, office user range, is where you get this blend. And so this presentation is really designed to try and identify the benefits and risks associated with not only those smaller organizations that most likely do not have their own IT, as well as an organization grows, and how when they start having internal and then blending that. So, and one of the keys is, again, as we look to build a framework, is we subscribe to ITIL, which is IT Information Library. Most people haven't heard of that, but if you're in the manufacturing world, you've probably heard of ISO. So there's different certificate or standards by which documentation and process standards by which other organizations operate. ITIL is in our world, and it's designed to make sure that people like us are aligning IT with the business needs and requirements. Day and I are both certified in this framework, and that's exactly what it is. It's a framework. Oftentimes, when you deal with IT, sometimes it feels like IT is driving the business as opposed to the other way around. Well, ITIL has really made sure that our goal is to align IT with your business, not IT pushing your business. Finally, we'll talk about above the line, and this is really where the next slide will get into that a little bit better. It's an IT maturity model, a framework of our own internal evolution that we've done to help our customers understand where we hope to help them and where we hope they'll enable them to focus inside of their world. So, with the next section, really it's about, again, an IT maturity model where, you got to build a foundation in order for you, to build everything else. So when we talk about a foundation, it's your core infrastructure. Again, this is where we're going to frame where the above the line means here, and you'll see that here in the next couple moments. But the foundation is your infrastructure, all the things you can touch, some things you can't touch, like your internet connection, your security. If any one of those things fail, you're probably not going to be able to do your job. So it's really one of those core components of foundation. Then you get into layering. Once you have good workstations and servers and switches and firewalls, those kind of core infrastructure in place, you can start layering in line of business applications and systems that you use. If you're a banking system, it might be your processing. It could be your check processing, online banking. If you're manufacturing, it's your ERP, maybe your CRM solutions, your accounting solutions, getting those systems in place. But your foundation needs to be aligned to support those different pieces. Next is, after you get those systems in place, we really want people to work on improving and integrating those systems. Once you buy the system and you have something actually physically running, you want to use it better and use it more. So that's what that next level is, as well as if you have disparate systems, because I don't think I've run across any organization yet that has one system that does everything for them. So the next piece is, once you move up this chain and of evolution or maturity in using these different systems, is you get into data mining, and then there's some little eye chart bullets there, which is key performance indicators, and increasing the frequency and the accuracy of the information you get as a leadership of the organization, so you can make decisions, effective decisions based on the data you're receiving. So now where does the above the line piece come into play? And I'll show you. Right there. So above the line is, let me actually hit two keys there. So the above the line component is right in the middle. Below the line is really where there's a lot of, I don't want to say commoditization is not the right word, but it's nearly identical. So that's one of the things we call general IT support. So if you look at across the small medium business segment, a lot of the infrastructure that people have, the servers are IBM or Dell or HP, workstations are Lenovo or Dell or HP, and so all that stuff is nearly the same for everyone. Even the applications at their core oftentimes function on the back end nearly the same. But what happens is, once you get above that line, things are unique and custom to your organization, where the people that are using it have special training and there's special processes that are actually in place in order for you to use those systems in the most efficient way for your organization. And so our goal for you, and the framework that I want you to keep in mind throughout this presentation as we look at benefits and risks associated with these different types of sourcing, is that our goal for all of our customers is that we want to help do the below-the-line stuff because, again, it's nearly identical across the small and medium business segment, but we want you to be able to work above the line because the more you can work above the line, the greater return on investment you're going to receive for your infrastructure and IT dollars. So that's the framework that I would like you to keep in mind as we move along here. And that's whenever we refer to above the line, this is what we mean, because we've seen examples where helping integrate and improve and getting better data out of your systems increases your ability to operate, and so you're not stuck at things breaking below the line. Any other comments to add there, Dave?
Well, I would just say that I think one of the reasons that you might have valued my participation is I work here at Mytech mostly with some of our larger clients who have a larger staffing base, and I think my experience would say that those of you who have more staff as opposed to less experience the benefits of above the line versus below the line a little more actively. Our goal at Mytech is to make sure even the smallest company has the ability to get that below the line component stabilized so that even you, because even small businesses need to focus on vision and things that data mining and system integration might benefit from. But larger organizations, financial institutions, healthcare organizations who have, say 100, 200 people, they really need to get that general IT support stabilized so they can focus on the above-the-line thing. So everything we're talking about, right, Nathan, in this presentation is really about how to ignite the above-the-line function of our clients.
Yeah, and thank you. You just reminded me there's one other major component that I want to make sure that those listening and participating today versus those who, as well as those who may be listening and watching in the future, because we do record these sessions, is that the above-the-line work, it's really difficult for companies like an outsource provider to facilitate. And it's best facilitated and leveraged by folks inside the organization. Because to dig into the unique and custom ways in which your organization operates really requires someone to live in that world. And by definition, as an outsource provider, we don't live in that world, right? So that's one of the other reasons why if our wish for our customers is for them to spend as much of that time above the line as possible, because that's where it's really looking at how you operate, how you use these systems, how you uniquely want to apply your processes and your philosophy to the way you just conduct business. And that's going to be better fulfilled by you than by someone like us. And that applies, I agree, Dave, that applies to large and small organizations alike. So, and I would even argue for smaller organizations it's even more important because they need to compete with the larger organizations. So the more they can stay above the line, the better. Okay, so thank you for enabling us to indulge in that aspect, because we feel that's important as we to frame the mindset as we move along here. So now we're going to get into the different types of sourcing. We're going to start with basically touching on insourcing or internal IT, outsourcing and external IT, and again, as I mentioned, hybrid or co-sourcing IT. We'll get into these different types of risks and benefits. So let's just dig in, and this is the core, content that we want you to really take away. And we did try to do a very candid, even though we're an outsourced IT provider, we did really try and have a candid view. So I hope you appreciate that as we go through here, that it shouldn't have a bend on working with an organization like us. It should just be a realistic, candid view of the benefits and risks. So first of all, on the benefit side, if you have an internal person, they can do anything, right? I mean, you can have them do almost anything you want to have done in the closet, whether it be the phone system or a workstation or a printer. Whereas when you do outsourcing, as a comparison, sometimes they have a very specific task, like that's the phone system provider. and you want them to touch your PC or your server or something like that, and they don't have the expertise, or that's just not within their purview. So that's something that's definitely a benefit of having an internal person. Again, as I mentioned, the phones, they can do the phone system, they can do IT support, pretty much deal with all the different aspects. Even if you have a camera system for your security, they can deal with that. And I kind of jokingly like to say that, heck, if they had some spare time and you want them to wash your car, you know what? That's something you can have them do if you really wanted to. That's not something you're going to get from an outsourced provider. Day, as I go through here, if you think of any others, by all means, please interject.
Yes.
Okay, great. So one of the other significant benefits that I think we see from a cultural perspective with insourcing is they're in the cube just down the hall. Now, they may be in a different building if it's a multi-location organization, but this one right here is one of what we hear from our customers is one of the most significant values of having someone internal, is that I can walk by their desk, grab them, bring them to my office, and we can work together on a problem. That's something that you typically don't get from an outsourced environment. When you're dealing with internal IT, you have more control over those standards. What I mean by that is if you want to use a Linux system versus a Microsoft system, or if you want to use, you can dictate whatever the technology and the functions of the technology you want. Typically, when you're dealing with an outsourced provider, just trying to give you some contrast here, they'll have their own standards. And so that if they don't do Linux, guess what? If you want to hire them, you're not going to be doing Linux. But that might be a great fit for your organization, and that's something that if you're internal, you can have more control in dictating what those are for your own organization. I noticed a couple people joined here as well just recently. By all means, if you have any questions you'd like us to interject into the conversation, please use your question pane on your control panel. The next item, it depends on the size of the organization, as is noted there, is that, but the reality is if you're hiring someone internally, you're going to pay lower labor costs. Now, one of the things where there's a threshold here as far as the benefit goes, the labor cost will be lower, but the overall cost, if you have to hire I'm just going to throw out a number, a $50,000 a year IT person, and that's just their W-2, not necessarily all the benefits and all the other fringe costs. Sometimes you can hire an outsourced provider, depending on the size of your organization, that might only have a total cost of, say, $20,000 or $30,000 a year. So there may be a delta because of the size of the organization you have. Once you get across that threshold, then the cost benefit's a little different analysis. But lower labor costs are definitely one of the benefits on the side of internal IT. And the last component that I like to throw out as far as the benefit is the diamond in the rough factor. What I mean by this is, and we've seen it time and time again, is that as an organization has grown, they have someone internal that just happens to know everything. They know the software you use. They're your web developer. They can help and fix your internal IT, and they have the breadth of knowledge because they've kind of grown up with your organization, or they've just been there a really long time. And so that's a great benefit, and you can find those people, and we've definitely worked with organizations that have those people. However, one of the risks thereof, which we'll get to next, is what happens when those people leave. And that's when we gave this presentation to the manufacturers group, as I mentioned, that hit a chord with a few people because they had the diamond in the rough that was able to do all these unique and capable things, but to try and replace that skill set in any one person was extremely difficult. But on the flip side, the benefit is if you find that person, they are a huge asset for your organization. Any other thoughts there, Day?
I do have a couple of comments, but I think this is maybe not quite the right time to insert myself, so carry on. But there are a couple of things that I want to say.
Sounds great. Thank you. So on the risk side, one of the things that you'll find of internal IT is that what we've learned is that no one person holds all of the expertise needed to run an organization. There's so many different things in IT that it's nearly impossible to have one person own all that data and own all that information and that knowledge and that skill set. So you're pigeonholed is maybe not the word I'm looking for, but something like that with regard to you're limited to the expertise of the person that you have internal, or the team you have internal. The risk is that there's one of the other components is that for any organization, you need different skill sets at different times. Rarely do you need a 40-hour-a-week project manager. Rarely do you need a 40-hour-a-week depot troubleshooting person. Rarely do you need someone who's an expert in security. And then other systems such as databases or applications like Exchange, or if you're hosting your systems on O365. And rarely, and you don't need someone 40 hours a week to do your IT planning and budgeting. But as a small organization, you need all of those things. You just need them incrementally over time. So you might find someone that has one of those skill sets, but it's unlikely you're going to find someone with all of those skill sets, and they might not like doing all of those skill sets. So and the reality is, no matter what size organization you are, you need to fill all these tasks. It's just whether or not you can find that in just your internal folks. Then the other component that we've heard that is a real risk and a pain point for organizations we work with that do have their own internal IT is that the person leading the internal IT person is oftentimes a VP of operations or a CFO. Might even be a CIO, but the CIO may or may not have the technical wherewithal to be able to give coaching and strategic direction and guidance to their team. So, which means that their team sometimes they're not sure if their team is blowing smoke or telling them things that they are really trying to, that's really valid, because they don't have the technical knowledge necessarily to challenge that point. Then there's, of course, staff turnover is difficult as far as finding, and if you have that diamond in the rough and that person turns over, that's difficult to fill. And the last thing is really they only have two things. Sorry, the second to last thing is exposure to your technology, which means that if you're running Exchange 2003, well, Microsoft is effectively, as of April 8th of this year, basically said you got to get rid of that. Well, if your internal person's never worked with Exchange 2010 or Exchange 2013, well, then you don't have any experience in it. So if you want that person to roll that technology out, guess what? You're the beta customer. You're the guinea pig. So there's things like that where they're only exposed to your technology. They might not necessarily have the skill sets to be able to migrate and move your organization forward. Finally, there's the win the lottery factor. That was replaced by, we replaced that with something that was there about getting hit by a bus, because we actually had one of our customers, their IT person got hit by a car walking across the street from lunch one day, coming back from lunch. And that person was fine. They didn't have to go to the hospital or anything. They just got a couple bruises. But that is the reality. What happens if this person, wins the lottery and ends up quitting? There's that factor as well. That's a significant risk. All right, Dave, we're about ready to go to the outsource and external IT. Do you want to throw in some comments?
Yeah, do you mind? So, when I think of where do you define the boundaries between what works for your organization internally versus externally? And I think that boundary line shifts. I think this is not an above the line or below the line thing as much as it is to the left of the line or to the right of the line in my brain anyway. And so I'd like to throw out, Nathan, the concept of three components that help define where that line can be drawn. Oops, I hit, okay. I've got my iPad up here with some notes. For me, it really amounts to either tools, people, or process. I mean, every business basically has to somehow utilize those three things: tools, people, and process. And a lot of times, a business will have the tools, say it's an application. Sometimes they even have the people, but I tell you what, where Mytech can really step in, or where an external outsourced IT company can really step in, is very often providing process. And I want to define that a little more carefully, because I'm not saying necessarily we are responsible for understanding your business process. The process I'm referring to is the process of making sure your infrastructure, all those below the line, the tactical part of your business below the line, that we have, I keep saying we, forgive me, but any outsourced IT company should have that down to the point where the tactical part of your business is operating very effectively, and then basically enabling the tools and the people. And I think one thing that companies sometimes misjudge is they think just because they buy the applications, the tools, or the computers, the hardware, right, And they even have people on board sometimes, particularly with companies I work with. Sometimes they've got already internal IT staff, sometimes multiple IT staff, whole teams of people. But they might not necessarily understand the process, like the ticketing systems and all the variables, the investment that a company like us makes in tools of our own that enable a very different, higher level of process. So I'm going to stop there, park for a moment, and then I'll come back to it after you discuss the outsourced slide, Nathan.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a good segue to the outsource piece, as well as then once we get into the hybrid components, because it's discussing the blend between the two.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll try and move along here quickly, going through. One of the benefits, as we already kind of talked about the pros and the converse between the internal versus external, is that you have entire teams of people at your disposal, so that if you need a project manager, guess what? You can just hire a project manager, or so on and so forth. The other piece is that internally, you're not responsible for coaching and hiring and training those resources. That's definitely a burden that's difficult to know what to be able to direct your team, especially if you're not technically adept. So if you're that CFO that's trying to manage an internal person, you don't have to worry about those variables and being able to give them proper career coaching and guidance. Typically with external IT providers, you have a greater benefit of being able to control your service level agreement. You can subscribe to different service levels as far as how fast they respond. How fast are they supposed to respond? How fast are they supposed to resolve issues? Most often, internal IT providers, if you're dealing with an internal person, they don't have the systems and tools in place, as Dave was referring to, that enable even tracking that stuff and being able to escalate and automate notifications. But so you have a greater opportunity for service level accountability with an outsourced provider. One of the things that falls on the burden of the outsourced provider is they have to do R&D. Technology is constantly changing, and they need to make sure that they are kept abreast of what is going on and what technology is going to have an impact on their world. And so they have to do R&D and testing and training internally, and that cost doesn't directly get put on your shoulders. Oftentimes, I like to say the benefit is long-term relationships, is mainly because we've experienced with many of our customers that there's been more staff turnover on our customers' side, and one of the longest-standing relationships that business has is with a company like us as an outsourced provider. So we can provide continuity through multiple different iterations of staff that you may have go through your ranks, and as an outsourced provider. One of the benefits, as Dave was also referring to, is we have defined standards. There's thousands of different technologies out there, and there's no way that an outsourced provider can train their staff on everything. So what we have to do is we have to test and vet and do that R&D that I already referenced and make sure that all this technology works well together, and that defines the standards by which we operate, by which we train our team. We have vendor relationships and partnerships. So all that stuff that is very beneficial to helping run an organization over time is already taken care of by working with an outsourced IT provider. The other thing that Dave was referring to is management systems, ticketing systems and documentation and knowledge base, monitoring, management, and alerting tools. Those are expensive tools, and we have to invest in those tools as an outsourced provider to be able to deliver our services. But oftentimes those tools and the investment that we've made do not translate to a viable, cost-effective investment if you only have one or two internal IT folks. All right, now going over to the risks. Often higher labor costs. Now, the reality is if you're hiring someone internal versus hiring someone external, if you're just comparing the hourly rate, you're going to pay higher labor costs for an external provider. And of course, what the overall cost depends on the size of the company, as we already referred. It very well may be that it makes more sense. I had a CFO one time tell me that we outsource the things that we do once. So as I referenced earlier, you have an Exchange 2003 server and you need to go to Exchange 2010 or 2013. Well, you're only going to do that once. So it actually would probably be lower cost, total impact to the organization to hire someone external than to have your internal person train themselves on your production environment. So while even though the labor cost might actually be higher, it may have a lower cost impact to the organization by outsourcing it. So again, it depends on the situation, but definitely higher labor costs. One of the risks that this could be a benefit or a risk, but I put it on the risk side because if you're going to hire an outsourced provider, and again, I would say this as advice to anyone, even if you're going to work with Mytech or not, is you should adhere to their standards. The reason why I put this on the risk side is because let's say you have a WatchGuard firewall, this is any particular brand that's out there, and the brands that are available or the manufacturers that are available for the provider that you're looking at do either SonicWall or Cisco. Well, guess what? You should put in a SonicWall or Cisco. And the reason why is because their entire team has been trained on those products. So the risk is that you may lose some investment dollars that you've spent in other technology, but if you're aligning yourself with an outsourced provider, even a hybrid provider, you're going to get better support and a better experience if you align to their standards. The other risk that definitely struck a chord with the manufacturer's presentation that we referenced earlier is that you're not in control of that business provider and the change that they may be doing. What if the business provider fails, goes out of business because maybe they're not fiscally operating their business soundly? They might change their focus. I've seen examples where even in the Minneapolis market where there's been organizations that used to provide managed services, as we call it, to small businesses, and then this cloud thing came about and Google Apps and Google Docs and those kind of things, and they shifted their focus over to a different, to Google. And if that's not in alignment with your business, well, now you have to make a decision. So you're not in control of that. You could outgrow them or they could outgrow you. That's definitely something that we've seen and we've heard as far as a risk of outsourcing. Another component is, personality or philosophical conflicts. That kind of goes to the adherence to standards. If your philosophy is not in alignment with theirs, like maybe that provider wants to duct tape things and Band-Aid things, and you don't, or vice versa. Maybe you want to do that, and that doesn't work for the provider. That's not going to be a very healthy relationship. So there's some risks there. And then, of course, just as any organization, there's usually key members, and you're not in control of the turnover of their staff, and that could have an impact to your organization. So there's definitely some potential risk there. So those are the kind of benefits and risks. Went through that quickly. I want to make sure that we get through the rest of the presentation. But Dave, you kind of had some segue comments that will guide us over into the next section, which is the hybrid sourcing. So go ahead.
Yeah, do you mind going back to that last slide just for a second?
Sure.
I just wanted a couple of quick comments on personality, philosophy, conflicts. I would encourage all of you to take that seriously as you outsource actually any of your professional services. I often refer to what I call a kitchen cabinet full of advisors. We all need accountants and a law firm and an IT firm and various other components of expertise to help our businesses operate that we may not have internally. But it's really important. I've noticed in IT, for some reason, there's sometimes a general hesitance to trust or to overly analyze the advice that an IT provider may be relating. And I think it's getting better, but I would encourage all of you to find a provider that you really do trust, and you don't have to spend too much mental energy deconstructing whatever it is they're recommending. I would equate it to if I went to a car dealer and just because I wanted to save a little money, it's, I'd like to buy a car with 3 wheels. Is that okay? That'll save me a little money, right? And of course they'd look at me like I was crazy. Like, you say what? You want to buy a car with 3 wheels? But they would not let me do that. Well, very often an IT company will not let you do something. There's always a reason for that. And I guess I just want to make that comment. And then also on the higher labor cost component, Nathan, I think I just want to also point out that, yes, there's higher labor costs, but the idea is by hiring an outsourced IT provider, you're able to, because of their expertise, they're able to focus on the specific needs that you have. And at the end of the day, your IT costs should actually go down as opposed to up. Just want to say that. So moving on. Next slide.
Thank you very much. All right, so moving on here, because I do want to, there's some points at the end I want to make sure that we get, and we have only 9 or 10 minutes left here. So one of the things I wanted to talk about hybrid sourcing your IT, because the reality is, if you look at all the different folks that you work with in order to deliver IT services, you're already doing this anyway, right? You probably have an internet service provider. Well, that's kind of part of your IT, so you're sourcing it there. You might have a software provider that's your line of business application that you work with for that piece. You might work with a hardware provider to buy equipment, or your outsource provider like a Mytech to help with some services. So you're probably already doing a blend of co-sourcing or hybrid IT anyway. The trick is to find the right balance, and I think that's what we're going to try and highlight some of the points here between the benefits and risks. So the benefits is you have the high touch of someone local or internal, such as being the cube down the hall, but you also have the ability to escalate and leverage some custom expertise with the outsourced providers, such as your software provider or managed services provider. You also can have help with managing and coaching and training. One of the things that we try and work with our customers, if they have their own internal IT, is we try and take the same methodology and philosophy about our coaching and training of our staff and making sure that they keep up to speed on their technologies. We want to be able to leverage that and share that information with our customers to potentially help gain access to training or gain access to testing and so on and so forth. Also, with the management systems are included. We've spent well over $250,000 in the last few years on systems to help us be more efficient in operating and working and supporting an IT environment. We share those tools with you, and that's blended with the hybrid environment. Not only it's not just the tools, but it's also process, workflow, and animation, as it notes. Knowledge-based systems, ticketing systems, alerting. And the other piece that I like to mention as a benefit is if you work together and you collaborate effectively, you essentially have a DR plan for your IT team. That's like the win the lottery factor or the diamond in the rough factor. If you don't have, you spend a lot of money oftentimes on your backups and sending data off-site and making sure you have redundancy. But one of the areas that you don't have redundancy is in your actual personnel, and this is one of the ways in which you can get it. And finally, it's a hybrid blend, so it's a lower cost than 100% outsourcing, depending on the size of your organization, of course. So it gives you a blend of the high touch and a blend of the cost. Moving over to the risks, we've experienced working with customers that it's difficult to, there's a gray area where you've got some internal people maybe making changes and external people making changes, and it requires a lot of communication to make sure that that line is drawn as far as the area of responsibility and accountability, so that if something happens, something breaks, we can dig into, well, where did the failure happen? Whose responsibility was it for that particular aspect of your environment?
Yeah, Nathan, that's where you need a really clear understanding of tools, people, and process, and who's responsible for what. And it takes a little bit of an analysis. Like we spend some time taking a look at the company's, our clients' operational maturity level to determine kind of where we land versus where they land in those three components in order to help draw that line.
Yeah, and the trick is it's different for every organization depending on the skill sets of the people. So, but yes, that is definitely where challenges can take place. Again, conflict, just as we mentioned as a risk before, the philosophical or personality differences that can happen at a leadership level. It can also happen at a tactical level. Again, risk is still the business change of provider. If they change their focus, same kind of components, the business could have problems that are outside of your control. The other risk is this type of engagement, it's easy to get out of alignment. If your business makes a change and you're not communicating that change to your provider, or if the provider business makes a change and they're not communicating it to you, or if there's a team change, it's just easy to get out of alignment. So we really recommend that in order to mitigate that risk, to make sure that you're communicating on a regular basis. Again, requires regular interactions, not only at an operational level, but as well as periodic, strategic direction with the leadership of the respective organizations. So with that said, there's lots more that I could probably put into all three of those different slides as far as insource, outsource, and hybrid. But these are the ones that kind of floated to the top as we dug in. So I want to keep moving along here, since we have about 5 minutes left, to how do you determine which one is right for you? Well, first and foremost, it's really about assessing your organization. It's looking at your size, what makes sense from a total cost of your IT support, whether it's internal, external, or hybrid. Understanding the people of your organization. Sometimes that's about the attitude of the people and the skill sets of the people. The reason why I mention attitude is that IT people that I've run across over the years, if they have the mentality that they are protective and controlling and they don't want to ever ask for help and they don't ever want to allow anyone into their world, those are the people that pose the greatest risk to your organization and the greatest risk to your relationships. So that's what some of the things what I mean by attitude when you're talking about people is assessing that. Encourage an open and inviting and collaborative environment, and that's definitely one of the things that we look for when we work with organizations. Intended growth plans and strategy. It may be that you start with an outsource because it makes most sense as a small organization. Then as you grow, you might start doing some hybrid, bring in an internal resource, and turn down your external sourcing, right? And then blend that over time. And then sometimes where, if you're in a manufacturing world where there's a lot of automation, maybe you don't need an internal resource, depending on the size of your organization, but maybe you're in a banking world where you leverage a lot of technology and a lot of systems. The size of organization might dictate you might have a smaller organization, but you might have more IT requirements. So that's what this means as far as how extensive your organization in particular uses technology, and then what are your particular pain points. So that's something where we can help, and that's where I'll kind of throw out this offer to help is our next section. Again, this is a very high-level overview of the different components. But there's a twofold offer that we'd like to put on the table for everyone today, and you'll be able to email us. One is that we put on a customer education appreciation event. Some of you who are online, I know have actually been to that event. Others may not. But this is where it's held on April 22nd. It's for you and one other colleague from your company. And one of the things I wanted to mention is the keynote speaker is Gino Wickman, who's the author of Traction, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. He's the keynote, and when I mentioned that to the manufacturers group, a lot of them have either read that book and are leveraging that system. So we welcome you to that. It's a free event, and registration just went live in the last few days, and so we can get you registered for this event. That'll definitely get you exposed to some education for yourself. And secondly, our other offer is that we wanted to offer a business and IT strategy session. What I mean by that is Day and I would be willing to sit down with you 2 hours at no cost for you and any other member of your leadership team for your company to dig into basically this presentation from a standpoint of, well, what are your personnel cost and risk benefit assessment, and understanding where you're going with your organization, and offer some recommendations to help provide some of that balance based on what we've experienced across lots of other organizations. So to do that, all you need to do is shoot an email to me, and we will coordinate a time to help you do that. We'll be able to individually, not generally like this presentation was, but individually dig in with your organization and help you assess candidly what that might look like. So that's our offer to assist and help. And by all means, please let us know if we can help you in that regard. So finally, I'll move on to just a final summary. We looked at the provide framework, and hopefully that you can understand that we want you to work above the line. There's different kinds of sourcing that could complement that below the line stuff that should hopefully enable you to work above the line. We gave you some options as far as how to determine which one is the right for you, whether it be internally assessing those things or whether we can help through either Tech Pulse or through a business and strategy session with you. Finally, the goal is so that you can work above the line. We want your stuff to work fast. We want your staff to be happy. And if we get staff like this working together, you know what? I think we've done our job. So with that, I really want to say thank you. And also, Dave, if you have any final comments to wrap things up. And I don't see any questions here online, but any comments, Dave, as a final wrap-up?
I would say is my personal offer, too, would be I'm a little more out there in the field actually meeting. I have a client base of my own that deals with these sorts of issues. So I can offer people case studies if they'd like to chat with me directly. Happy to relate actual real-life experiences we and they have had as part of that analysis. So feel free to contact Nathan or me through Nathan.
Great. Well, thank you very much. One of the things we always try and do is wrap up right on time, and it is 12 noon Central Standard Time. So I want to say thank you to everyone who watched. The slides are available, so I can email them out to you if you wish, as well as it's recorded, and this will be posted to our website within the next 24 hours. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day, and thank you for watching right now, or if you're watching the recorded version, I appreciate your time. Have a great day.